Pablo, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? How's things, Pablo? JP, good to see you. How you doing? Happy Monday. Evening, Miles of CMF. Tor, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Scott, good to see you. How you doing? How you been, brother? T, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? What's up, Miles? What's up, CMF? Kerry, good to see you, brother. How you doing? How you been? How's everyone doing on their Monday? A lot of things have been happening, essentially, which we're going to go from tonight's live right now. A lot of things have been happening regarding the regulations that's going on and what's going to happen next. And XRP, has been climbing through the ranks. It's now, valued higher than McDonald's, is valued higher than, if I'm not mistaken, Shell is also crossed that line too. There's a lot of factors in play, which we're going to discuss on tonight's live. Thank you so much to, by the way, everyone who has liked and essentially liked and retweeted this live as well right at the beginning. Hey, brother, Kamal, good to see you, brother. How you doing? How you been? Woodhouse, good to see you, brother. How you doing? How you been? Good evening, Miles of CMF. Orphan, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Jason, evening, Miles, good to see you as well. How you doing? How you been? Good evening, Professor Miles and CMF family. Funky brother, good to see you as well. How you doing? How you been? So, let's do the intro, disclaimer, and by that time, everyone's tuned in for the first part of the live. Welcome to the CMF Live if you're watching this for the first time ever. The CMF stands for Crypto Miles Family, and my name is Miles. You can tune to this live Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. London time, where I share the most recent news regarding cryptocurrencies, CBDCs, AI, politics, and regulations. Pretty much everything you need to know about regarding this world transforming into a digital space. We also do Q&As in this live as well, which means if you do have any questions or any statements to make, put it down the comment section. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have, even to read out your statements. The disclaimer of this live, as always, is not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. So, welcome to the CMF Live Show. This is episode 338 of the CMF Live. If it's your first time, if you're regular, let's go CMF. By the way, thank you so much to honestly everybody who has already liked and essentially retweeted this live from the CMF. If you haven't done that, CMF members, take 5 seconds to like and retweet this live. Be absolutely amazing. I do want to grow this family as we go along because I have very, very big plans for the CMF. So, a lot of news to essentially go from tonight's live. We're going to talk about Trump news. We're going to talk about Treasury news, crypto purchases, companies' perspectives, CEO perspectives, banking news to go through on tonight's live, Ripple news to go through on tonight's live, mixture of news to go through. And the first one we are going to be starting is with the Trump news. But before we go through the Trump news, let's go start the conversation quick, and then we'll go straight into the first news on tonight's live. So let's see where we're at inside the conversation. We were at here. Miles, your thoughts on FLR, SEI, and HOT and XDC during this stretch. And Funky brother, good to see you. So how you doing? How you been? And Scott, my thoughts on Flare. It's a genuine project. I've never said it's a must-have project. Not saying that you said that, but Flare's a genuine project. It's a good project. SEI, good. HOT, better. XDC, even better, is what I would say. They will do well. Good evening, Miles. How are you doing? I'm doing great. Kenny, how you been? How's things? Comatose, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? JP says if everybody could take a minute to share the live, make a comment out of it, that would be fantastic. Absolutely facts. If you do get time, CMF members, just take 5 seconds to like and retweet the live. If you watch us on X, if you watch us on YouTube, just drop a like. Scott, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Not bad. Just been traveling all day. So tired now. Let's go, Woodhouse. Share the live. Let's go, Scott. And first news on tonight's live is regarding Trump Media. So Trump Media's Bitcoin treasury stack has reached $2 billion as the company essentially furthers push into crypto. Now, we all know that essentially the crypto portfolio that was created through essentially Trump Media. Now, they did start off obviously with Bitcoin, but now they've expanded into other cryptocurrencies. So here it is, Trump Media and Technology Group The Donald Trump-backed firm behind social media platform Truth Social disclosed today that it currently holds essentially roughly $2 billion in Bitcoin and Bitcoin-related assets under its treasury strategy program, in other words, other cryptocurrencies. At essentially BTC's price of just below $118,000 at a press time, or essentially that would imply around essentially it will apply around 17,000 coins. As per the announcements today, Trump Media's Bitcoin stash represents around 2/3 of the firm's $3 billion in liquid assets. The company essentially has another $300 million acquiring options tied to Bitcoin essentially linked equities as well, which the company may convert into spot Bitcoin based on market conditions. They said we're rigorously essentially implementing our publicly announced strategy, fulfilling our Bitcoin treasury plans, said CEO Devon in a press release. He said these assets help ensure our company's financial freedom, help us and protect us against discrimination by financial institutions, and will create synergies with the utility tokens we've been planning to introduce across essentially social media and Truth Social. The disclosure follows as essentially a May announcement that Trump made had successfully essentially raised $2.3 billion via the sales of common stocks and convertible notes to establish its corporate Bitcoin treasury. Exact same steps essentially MicroStrategy took to expand their Bitcoin portfolio is the exact same steps essentially Trump Media has also taken as well. The scale of the firm's Bitcoin treasury looks poised to make it one of the largest Bitcoin holders among publicly traded Wall Street companies. President Donald Trump's son also recently co-founded a mining firm, American Bitcoin, which has also purchased roughly $23 million essentially worth of Bitcoin since its debut back in essentially April. Besides creating a Bitcoin treasury, Trump Media has also been active in creating crypto-focused financial essentially products also, including filing for several Truth Social branded exchange essentially ETF products, a standalone Bitcoin ETF and a dual Bitcoin and Ethereum ETF, and recently also Truth Social essentially blue chip ETF tracking a basket essentially of cryptocurrencies including Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Crow, and Ripple's XRP. President Trump's crypto endeavors began increasing essentially well before that, though most notably the debut of the official Solana-based meme coin essentially on Trump in January, just before he's essentially returning and essentially become the president of the United States, plus last fall's launch of the Trump-backed decentralized finance platform, World Liberty Financial. So Trump Media, essentially, the filings have come out. They're holding roughly about $2 billion worth of Bitcoin, or essentially Bitcoin ETFs. They're still pursuing the idea of a basket of cryptocurrencies as an ETF, and the idea of a Bitcoin ETF, and the idea also of a Bitcoin and Ethereum ETF also going to be happening. So, but, you know, it just shows that Trump-backed media is being transparent with their holdings, which is great to see. Some may not be able to say that for MicroStrategy. Now, what we're going to be talking about next is a company that's came forward and decided to follow MicroStrategy's footsteps, but instead purchase a different token. This company, this fintech company, has started its own crypto portfolio, and their first purchase is $200 million for a Solana treasury. So here it is. The transaction strengthens essentially Mercury's position in blockchain finance, possibly attracting more institutional moves into the Solana ecosystem and expanding on-chain activities. Mercury's Fintech Holdings Inc., a blockchain-focused fintech firm, announced today a $200 million credit line agreement with an entity affiliated with Solana. This initiative essentially aims to establish a Solana-based treasury strategy, thereby bolstering essentially its digital finance operations. Key players of the essentially agreement include Mercury Fintech and Solana Ventures. The questions around the exact legal entities indicate that as Solana Ventures Limited remains unresolved. The $200 million agreement underscores Mercury's commitments to engaging with Solana's network. Immediate industry effects could include a heightened focus on institutional DeFi involvements with Solana's ecosystem. The expansion to Solana's DeFi space may heighten activity across Solana-based projects and validators, according to some market observers. Broad implications encompass the sustained essentially raise in corporate engagements in high-performance essentially layer 1 blockchain platforms like Solana. The initiative reflects a growing confidence in decentralized finance as an assessment-generating avenue, despite essentially existing questions questions on credit arrangements and details. The MFH is evolving beyond fintech infrastructure to engage directly in the value and the creation and the utility of decentralized networks, is what they said. Solana is emerging as a high-performance layer for tokenized assets, real-time payments, and institutional-grade DeFi, combining speed, cost efficiency, and growing regulatory acceptance, said the essentially chief strategy officer of Mercury FinTech. He said the potential outcomes of this move may diversify Mercury's essentially financial strategy and offer also insights into the DeFi landscape's growth. By enhancing their Solana's position, the company potentially sets a precedent for other fintechs exploring expanded blockchain involvements. So another company has essentially decided from the institutional sector, but this one being a fintech company from the start, but decided to create essentially some sort of a crypto portfolio and not going for the, essentially Bitcoin strategy crypto portfolio or even Ethereum one, decided to go on the Solana route. Now, we do have a few institutions out there that have, for example, a Solana essentially crypto treasury. Obviously, we know the Bitcoin one's biggest one being MicroStrategy, second biggest being essentially MetaPlanet. And we also have the other companies out there as well who essentially own also a XRP essentially crypto portfolio as well. This is great to see that more institutions, or even in this case, fintech companies, coming forward and creating their own crypto portfolios. The more institutions that come forward and create some sort of a crypto portfolio, the more liquidity that will be entering the crypto market space. Now, some of you might say, well, this company is only going for essentially only going for Solana. Why is that useful if somebody's holding XRP or XLM or essentially Cardano or AVAX or whatever? Well, the thing is, some companies start off with one token and then expand into others, which is what's really happening. I'll give you an example. Trump Media, for example, started with a Bitcoin portfolio only, but then decided somewhere down the road to create a basket of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Solana, and essentially Kronos, and put them all into one basket. So even though that these institutions that come forward and create one crypto portfolio for one token, sooner or later they will expand into other tokens and bring more liquidity into the market space for the top 10, top 20, top 30 crypto projects. So all in all, it's very good news. Now, not just for Solana, but for the crypto space. Now, moving on essentially from that news to a record inflow for cryptocurrencies. A signal for market confidence is what we're going to talk about next. But before we talk about that, let's go to the comment section first. As I said previously, if this is live, which means if you do have any questions or comments or statements to make, put it outside the comment section. More than happy to help you out. So let's see what's happening inside the comment section. Then we go straight into the next news, which is what we're going to talk about is the market confidence that's going on right now for particular projects. So let's see where we're at. We were at here. Mike, good to see you. How you doing, brother? How you been? Evening. Artistic says, hi, Miles. How's things? Things are great. How's things with you, Artistic? Evening, Miles. And Susie, let's go. Good to see you. How you doing, Susie? How you been? I hope everyone is doing well and had a good day. Let's go. How you doing, Scott? Yes, Miles. Nori, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Hi, Miles. Hope you had a great weekend, and hello to all the CMF. Adi, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Hope you had a great weekend as well. What do you think about Axon Coin AXGT DAO? Do you want me to be very honest? I have zero opinions about Axon Coin AXGT DAO, mainly because I haven't looked into it. I'll be honest. But what I can do, Nori, is so typically when someone wants particular information on tokens I don't know about or need to look into them, because I want to know what their contracts are, what's in play, do they have any contracts, do they have licenses, do they need licenses to operate? Because we've got to realize that now that we're moving into such a regulated space, I just want to say this. If you are going towards new crypto projects out there, if you're somebody that's trying to explore other new projects, just remember one thing. The crypto projects that you're looking into that are new inside the crypto space, if they don't have particular licensings and they need particular licensings or so on, or essentially any contracts in play, they're not projects you should be really looking into, because now that we're in such a very regulated space, institutional space, regulations are passing. We had the votes, they've already passed. Trump's signing them one by one into law. So what I'm trying to say is your focus should be right now only on crypto projects that will do well under regulations. If there's a crypto project out there that's promising you the world, but it can't operate under regulations, then it's practically useless, to be fairly honest. If there's a crypto project out there that's promising you the world in tokenization and real estate and automotive industries and AI industries, but it can't operate under a legal framework, it's pretty much useless. Because we're so into regulations right now with the United States and the rest of the countries following hold that if it doesn't have the correct licensings, if it can't operate in a legal framework, then it's pretty much totally useless. but I can take a look at that. I can take a look at that project for you, no problem. What I would say is put a comment outside the live on YouTube, and I'll just reply back to your comment. So under this video on YouTube, put a comment outside the live, and I'll just reply back to your comment. No problem. I'll take a look at it for you and give you a perspective. Scott, let's go. Ray says, "What up, Miles and CMF? Hope all is well." Ray, good to see you. How you doing? How you been, brother? How's things? Now, record cryptocurrency inflows signal market confidence. Cryptocurrency investment products saw record inflows of $4.39 billion last week, marking essentially their highest since data essentially tracking began in 2014. Major digital asset fund providers, including BlackRock, Grayscale, Bitwise, were very pivotal in this influx of liquidity coming to the table. The recent surge in inflows underscores the heightened institutional engagement and signals strong market confidence in digital assets, because right now it's all about the institutions. The retail can only push the market so far. The institutions can push it further and beyond. And governments can also do a lot more as well. But, you know, as I said, because we're in so much regulations right now, this is basically the institutional run now and the regulation run. Major digital asset fund providers have reported record inflows last week, with BlackRock, Grayscale, and Bitwise playing a very critical role. James, for example, CoinShares head of research, highlighted these record inflows, emphasizing the continued growth in market engagements. Global crypto investment products attracted a record of $4.39 billion of inflows last week, the strongest tally since CoinShares began tracking all the data back in 2014, is what James said, the head of research at CoinShares. He said BlackRock's crypto assets under management now stand at roughly $79.6 billion, with $14.1 billion in net inflows for Q2 of 2025. Bitcoin saw essentially $2.2 billion in weekly inflows, maintaining essentially its leading role, with Ethereum essentially achieved its highest inflows to date. Ethereum's $2.12 billion of inflows surpasses its entire previous year's total, indicating increasing essentially institutional interest. Solana, XRP, and Sui also recorded positive but smaller inflows, reflecting broader market engagements. Institutional grade products from regulated platforms dominated the inflow landscape, essentially showing a preference for secure and compliant investment. Also, routes outflows in Brazil and Germany suggest regional allocation variations, indicating diverse market dynamics. Analysts also suggest that the current inflows could catalyze further essentially market growth given historical trends after notable surges, and Ethereum's also recent performance mirrors Bitcoin's patterns from earlier also trends, hinting essentially at the potential future developments for altcoins. Now, while we have so much of a market confidence going on, and there should be a lot of market confidence towards certain crypto projects that will do tremendously well under regulations now that the United States is passing regulations one by one. On the other side of the spectrum, we have the United Kingdom, which I'm sure some of you have heard, and if you haven't, I'm about to share the news to you. The UK is thinking about selling its Bitcoin essentially portfolio, the Bitcoin that they seized from other illicit essentially criminals. So here it is. The UK is looking to sell its $7 billion seized Bitcoin stockpile to fix a budget hole. So the United Kingdom right now has a major issue, which is that the debt for the UK is also growing by the second. And the government, essentially inside the United Kingdom, isn't doing much help to reduce that budget. In fact, they're just increasing it day by day and essentially putting it back into essentially the, well, not the UK citizens' pockets, but the people that just jump across the border. Let's just put it that way. So the UK government is thinking about selling its $7 billion worth of Bitcoin to fund more projects for immigrants than rather to fund project for British citizens. But now somebody like Michael Saylor is not going to be happy about this news, but here it is. The United Kingdom's Home Office, the nation's interior ministry, is eyeing the sale of these seized crypto assets in a bid to fill its deficit in the government's budget. Such a sale could potentially dent a recently renowned Bitcoin and crypto strong essentially surge. The UK Home Office is working with the police to sell off its stockpile of seized Bitcoin and is currently designing essentially a framework to securely hold a crypto essentially ahead of the planned liquidation, according to a essentially report that came up today on the Daily Telegraph. While the total amount of all crypto confiscated by the UK is still unclear, The stockpile, for as far as we know, consists essentially of at least 61,000 bitcoins worth roughly about $7 billion. Seized from 2018 from a Chinese Ponzi scheme, the UK government did. This makes the UK the holder of the third largest Bitcoin stash among countries that own the alpha cryptocurrency. A woman essentially was jailed for 6 years and 8 months in 2024 for her role in laundering 150 Bitcoin on behalf of Chinese women linked to the theft. Offloading the UK's vast Bitcoin holdings could help the £22 billion budget gap due to the raising borrowing costs and slow growth. Chancellor of the Exchange of Rachel Reeves is seeking essentially funding for welfare reversals and cost of living measures. The UK authorities typically keep 20% to 30% of seized assets, divided between law enforcement and budgets and government funds, while the Crown essentially Prosecution Service has requested permission from the High Courts to retain the confiscated coins. With the proceeds then being allocated to the Treasury, victims have requested that the funds will be returned to them. The UK's Bitcoin is still largely contested. Susie Violet Ward, the CEO of the crypto lobby group Bitcoin Policy UK, said in a post on X, essentially on Sunday, blasting the Telegraph report as essentially a centralization of overstatements. Now, over substance. Chinese authorities and victims are demanding it back right now. No sale can happen while that legal process is unresolved, Ward explained. So the UK government wants to sell $7 billion worth of Bitcoin. There's one major issue. They don't actually own the Bitcoin, kind of. So the people that essentially the British government confiscated the $7 billion worth of Bitcoin from, the Bitcoin was used for illicit activities. There was one woman in the UK, Chinese woman in the UK, that was essentially money laundering this essentially amount of Bitcoin, and the UK essentially confiscated through her. Now, the people that got scammed apparently through her want their Bitcoin back, and the UK government since has not given their Bitcoin back. And apparently, all the people that want their Bitcoin back are essentially, Chinese essentially citizens that want their Bitcoins back from the UK government. At the same time, the UK government wants to sell the Bitcoin to essentially fund government projects. One of those government projects was, in fact, if someone wants to know, the British government lied to the public and essentially funded a £1.9 billion, essentially, or £1.2 billion, essentially, immigration, essentially, policy, and kept it silent from everybody. And the press was not allowed to speak about it for about 2 years because they were suppressed to speak about it. And then the people found out, and essentially the press finally revealed the news, and the UK government had to come clean of where the £1.2 billion or £1.9 billion disappeared to, because they couldn't explain it, that why they were spending so much money on immigrants coming to the UK while crime is so high in the UK. The roads are unbearable to drive on, and nobody's safe in this country anymore. In fact, you would get better quality of life if you restart and come back into this country, by the looks of it, how it's looking right now. Not something I would say, obviously, for anyone to do, and I'm not slandering anything or the British government in any sort of a way, but it's just certain things that need to be fixed. And I'm not slandering anybody either. It's just what was shared on the news. I'm just sharing that with everybody here. Now, last year, the German state of Saxony also sold 50,000 essentially Bitcoin for $2.9 billion, which was a massive regret from the German government for getting rid of their Bitcoin way too soon, because they could have paid off more debt that their country essentially owns, but they sold off their Bitcoins too soon. Now, essentially, in hindsight, the sale was strongly commended by the crypto pundits, since the German government missed out on approximately $2.3 billion in profits more by selling too early. Observers also have cited the 1999 UK gold reserve sale under the Chancellor Gordon Brown as a cautionary tale, where selling at market lows led to billions in missed profits. Given that many essentially crypto analysts anticipate also Bitcoin to rocket higher this year, a potentially enormous sale could also end up being a short-sighted in the long term. Jordan Walker, essentially founder of the crypto advocacy group Bitcoin Collective penned an open letter to the UK government urging it not to sell its Bitcoin in response to the Telegraph essential report that came out today. Selling these holdings to address a short-term budget deficit would send a concerning signal, he said, adding it could have a long-term consequence for the UK's economy in terms of positioning. I'll be very honest, the British economy is not doing too well. We've so far had over 10,400 millionaires leave the UK just last year, and this year the numbers are also piling on top because the taxes are through the roof and the safety is also pretty much down. Crime is through the roof, taxes through the roof. There's a reason why all the millionaires are leaving the UK. That being said, Chancellor Reeves said in April that the UK's Treasury is eager to work with the United States further, essentially, to better support innovation across the fast-growing crypto industry through clearer regulations. So there are some members on the British government that do want to help with the United States, do want to work with the United States as well to bring in some crypto regulations over here and get things moving and so on. But there are also some members of the British government that just want to sell the Bitcoin and get rid of it and essentially pay off some of their debt. Through our plan for change, we are making Britain the best place in the world to innovate and the safest place for consumers. Very big words coming from the British government, knowing that essentially the UK or London has the highest crime rate even further than New York right now. But robust rules around crypto will boost investor confidence, support essentially the growth of the fintech, and protect the people across the UK. She said in a statement, at a time, it remains to be seen whether the UK will go the German route, which is essentially sell their Bitcoin, or copy the US essentially National Bitcoin Reserve Plan and other essentially regulations. Obviously, the intelligent move would be to copy the British, essentially copying the American moves by bringing in crypto regulations like a Clarity Act, so we know where cryptocurrencies stand, for example, or essentially a Genius Act, so we know what stable coins essentially can be used as legal tender and so on. The best option for the British government will obviously be to follow Trump's footsteps. The worst option for the British government would be to follow Germany's footsteps, who lost out on making another $2.3 billion extra on top of their money. In fact, Germany wasn't the only country that sold their Bitcoin way too soon. Bulgaria, if I'm not mistaken, had a sufficient amount of Bitcoin as well, which they seized from illicit activities, and they sold it off way too soon, sooner than Germany. And if Bulgaria kept the money that they had from amount of Bitcoin from then until now, Bulgaria could have actually cleaned its debt as a country, just completely cleaned it. But they sold it way before Germany as well. So let's see, is the British government is going to be choosing the correct path, or are they going to be, as usual, choosing the wrong path, which is why millionaires leave the UK by the second and taxes going through the roof also by the second, so is crime. Honestly, everybody right now in the UK is waiting for essentially voting to happen again. But I'll be very honest, they're all in the same boat anyway. So it doesn't matter who you vote for, Labour, Conservatives, essentially Reform, Tories. It doesn't matter who you vote for in the UK. It's going to be the same thing all over again. The only way we will get difference in the UK is if we get somebody like Donald Trump, who's a businessman, not a politician, steps in and essentially runs a country as if he was running a business, which means profits is all they care about, not digging a bigger hole in the debt. So unless we find somebody like that to run the UK, like an actual businessman, like Trump, for example, the UK is pretty much doomed. Honestly, when voting season comes up, it doesn't matter who you vote for. You can vote for Labour again, you can vote for Conservatives, Reform, vote for whoever you want. It's going to be the same story all over again from the start. Now, so let's see, down the road where the UK is going to be standing. Right move or wrong move, time will tell. Now, Jerome Powell is what we're going to talk about next. Another moron. Jerome Powell faces essentially, not charges, but they're looking into a criminal investigation right now regarding Jerome Powell of essentially overspending on funds that he might have hidden from the public eye, which Trump is trying to dig up on him right now. I'll be very honest. If Jerome Powell did mismatch essentially funds, did overuse essentially taxpayer money, or printed too much money for his own pocket, now would be the best time for him to just step down and disappear. Because if he thinks he's going to stand until the last second, it's going to be prison for life. Because he's going to go down for a fraud case, or it's going to be house arrest or prison, essentially. I don't know if he's stupid enough to take any of those routes, but the best option for him to be is just step down now. There was a reason Gary Gensler didn't wait for Trump to throw him out the door of the SEC, and instead Gary Gensler decided to quit the same day Trump became president. Because you can't win against Trump. Nobody can win against Trump. There's a reason why Gary Gensler left. And so if Jerome Powell is smart enough, he'll leave before this investigation gets too heated and he ends up going into a prison. I don't think he'll do very well in prison. Jerome Powell faces criminal referral aimed at the Fed building dispute. Jerome Powell, essentially chair of the Federal Reserve, has been criminally referred to the Department of Justice right now by Rep. Anna, essentially alleging the prejudgery of connected to a $2.5 billion renovation of the Federal Reserve's essentially building. So the referral raises essentially issues about transparency and physical accountability at the financial essentially reserve, at the Federal Reserve, with a wide implications for the market trust and economic policies. Jerome Powell faces a criminal referral essentially over alleged misrepresentation concerning the Federal Reserve's headquarters renovation, said essentially Rep. Anna, who accused Jerome Powell of making materially essentially false claims during testimonies. Powell essentially denies allegations and has requested a formal review by the Office of Inspector of General. Jerome Powell made several materially essentially false claims under oath during a Senate essentially testimony regarding the extent of luxury products and so on, and the justification of cost overruns at the essentially building, the Federal Reserve building, new one. Rep. Anna also essentially said the details of the controversy point to disputes about luxury upgrades and project cost overruns. The president, essentially Donald Trump, and Bill have also voiced criticism, promoting calls for a resignation. Though essentially financial implications are under scrutiny, the issue is largely political, yielding no direct impact on crypto markets so far, and no essentially movements on major crypto assets like essentially Bitcoin and Ethereum have been observed. I'll be very honest, XRP is doing pretty damn well for itself. Bitcoin and Ethereum might be slightly staggered, and essentially no movements are happening, Bitcoin especially, and Ethereum, no surprise there. But XRP is doing tremendously well for itself right now. Financial analysts note that while Jerome Powell referral does not include direct crypto transactions or macroeconomic essential uncertainty that could affect essential market stability, historically such essential referrals are rare, with little present impacting on-chain activities or DeFi protocols, often essentially interpreted as symbolic in the light of a essential political stance of the Federal Reserve. I'll be very honest. If Jerome Powell resigns, of course the crypto market's going to react in a positive way for 1 or 2 days and so on. And the person that's going to replace him is going to be pro-crypto, which is going to work out even better for us in the long term. Also knowing that Ripple also, applied for the Fed essentially account and the banking license that's going on. Also on that, later on tonight's live, I want to share you a little bit of interesting news regarding the banking license that Ripple's going for. Scott Benson also announced that he could impact market stability, influencing cryptocurrency sensitivity to U.S. monetary policies. Scott Benson, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, has called for 3-on-3 reviews of the Federal Reserve during his appearance on CNBC Squawk Box, where he criticized the Federal Reserve's handling of economic policies. He said, "What we need to do is examine the entire Federal Reserve institution and whether they have been successful." Benson emphasized, indicating his strong stance on physical reforms. Key players involved include Scott Benson, Jerome Powell, and President Donald Trump, who continues pressuring essentially the Federal Reserve for interest rate cuts. Benson has voiced strong opinions on the institution's past economic strategies and that he essentially finds concerning. Financial and market impacts are essentially anticipated, with particular focus on assets such as essentially cryptocurrencies for potential change or market shifts. Political implications may also essentially arise as essentially changes in the Federal Reserve's essentially operations could shift economic landscapes. Social and business sectors are essentially dependent on the Fed's policies may need to adjust strategies proactively. Historically, high-level reviews of the Federal Reserve have driven short-term market fluctuations, particularly affecting essentially digital currencies. The direction taken essentially by stakeholders could signal essential regulatory shifts or technological advancements in response to this review call. So, Scott Benson, Donald Trump, Rep Anna Rule essentially investigating right now Jerome Powell on essentially mismanagement of funds. Are they going to find anything on Jerome Powell is the main question. My answer would be hell yes. Honestly, you can't point to a clean politician. It just doesn't happen. And I know Jerome Powell says, I'm not a politician, I'm the Fed chairman, I'm not biased in any sort of way, but please give it a rest. We all know that where he stands, and it's not with Trump, it's not with the Trump administration, he stands with the other parties. It's very obvious on what part of the party he stands, what essentially side of the spectrum he stands on. And he is a politician, as much as he like to say he's not a politician, he's a Fed chairman, he has to be unbiased. He isn't, and he is a politician. And also, name one politician that isn't dirty or crooked. You can't name one. There's not a single politician on this planet that isn't greedy or essentially has conducted some sort of illicit activities or has conducted some sort of under-the-table deals or so on. So the chances of them finding anything on Jerome Powell is extremely high, through the absolute roof high, to be fairly honest. So this is why I'm saying if Jerome Powell was smart enough, he will quit now before things get too heated and he ends up in a prison cell next to Upside Down Pineapple. And by that, I mean the founder of essentially FTX. Now, Block Inc. is what we're going to talk about next. Before we talk about Block Inc. and the S&P 500 and the entire crypto space, let's go inside the comment section first. As I said previously, this is live, which means if you do have any questions or statements to make, put it down inside the comment section. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have. So let's go inside the comment section first, and then we go straight into the next news. Let's see where we're at before we go to the next news on tonight's live. Okay, we were at here. Thank you, Nori. No problem anytime. Happy Pisces. Good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Good evening, Miles. Mike, good to see you. How you doing? How you been, Michael? How are you doing today? I'm doing great. What did I miss? Quite a bit, actually. But I'll do a gist of what we talk about towards the end of the live. Miles, just liked and reposted this live on X as I do every night. Thank you so much, Funky Brother, for liking and retweeting live as you do every night on X. CMF members, if you haven't liked and retweeted this live, take 5 seconds or 2 seconds or even 1 second just to like and retweet the live on X. As I said previously, I do need your help, obviously, to grow this family. You have very big plans. And that's the latest, that's the least we can do for our family. Let's go. Good evening, Miles and CMF. Free Feather, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Hi, Miles and CMF. George, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? UK will make the same mistake Germany did a couple of years ago by selling their BTC. I think so as well. I'll be very honest. Selling Bitcoin still won't solve the problem. Maybe spending better what they essentially have for the long term. I agree. Miles, I lived in London all my life, and this country has gone down the pan and is worse day by day. Me too, and I agree. Free country, UK, 14 years in jail if only say something that the government don't like. Yeah. I'm just waiting for for XRP to do well. Then, boss, I'm gone from this. Yeah, I agree. A lot of people are probably going to leave the UK. Honestly, after this crypto bull run, there's going to be, I think the entire crypto space is going to move out the UK, to be fairly honest. Most governments don't pick the right path. CMF members know this. Right or left, Dem or Republicans, is all the show/game, all business, nothing personal. Facts, I agree. Miles, to describe the living in London right now, I can write a book with minuses and the stupidity. The life isn't just the theater, it's a... yes, I agree. I agree, Shucks. I agree, Kali. JP, let's go. Now, Block Inc. is what we're going to talk about next, and the S&P 500. Jerome Powell, the other Gary Gensler, pretty much. I think it's Gary Gensler's cousin at this point. Now, Block joins the S&P 500, boosting essentially crypto engagements. Block Inc. Essentially inclusion in the S&P 500 underscores the growing integration of Bitcoin-centric fintechs in traditional finance. S&P 500 and Block coming together, it's like a beacon for the rest of the institutions, of how much the crypto space is connected to the traditional financial space, which is what we love to see, especially now that we're in regulations. Block Inc., founded essentially by Jack Dorsey, is set to integrate into flagship, essentially ETFs like SPY and VOO, following the S&P 500's inclusion. Now, institutional involvement will increase as funds automatically essentially purchase shares, elevating the block's market visibility, and Bitcoin's essentially payment capabilities are being integrated into Square terminals alongside other ventures like Proto, essentially, and BitKey, projects strengthening Bitcoin's utilities. What's happening right now? Bitcoin is the native currency of the internet and a critical tool for global economic empowerment, is what Jack Dorsey said, the CEO of Block Inc. The inclusion essentially is expected to influence both Bitcoin's perception and block market standing. Bitcoin-centric infrastructure developed essentially by Block Position is essentially a pioneering fintech entity. Dorsey Visions emphasizes Bitcoin as a critical economic tool. This move parallels essentially Tesla's earlier S&P 500 induction, now highlighting mainstream acceptance of innovative financial technology firms. Block's approach suggests a shift in Wall Street's stance towards crypto-integrated businesses, essentially as Bitcoin's market presence broadens. Financial experts anticipate more profound mainstream adoption. Industry reactions point to potential increased institutional investments, validating Jack Dorsey's strict focus on Bitcoin. The event reflects a pivotal moment for Bitcoin's integration with the legacy financial systems. Is Bitcoin the best option for money, for a new form of money, for everybody around the world to be using Bitcoin to do transfers and pay for stuff and pay for groceries and pay for your mortgages and loans and so on? Not really. I'll be very honest, because it's slow and congested and expensive sometimes to be doing one transaction essentially on Bitcoin's network. And I'll be very honest, the crypto space is what, this big still? The crypto space is only this big still? Imagine if everybody started using Bitcoin as a payment system. The crypto space is this big and the network is congested, and sometimes payments can take hours to go through, and the fees sometimes go through the roof. So imagine we go from this space of a crypto space to the entire world using Bitcoin essentially as a form of a payment. It's just not going to be able to cope, because if it can't cope with the amount of people that are using essentially Bitcoin now in terms of payments, and we have congested networks and sometimes it takes hours for the payments to go through, imagine if 6 billion people were using as a network for payments. It just wouldn't work. It's not going to work now. It won't work later on either. So what is an alternative? As I said this before, Bitcoin is a good asset to have on the side, as you know, it's a real estate asset. Somebody put it very perfectly. There was a Wall Street person that came up forward. So it was a Wall Street dude that was essentially on Bloomberg. They were doing an interview with him, and he said, you know, would you use Bitcoin to buy a cup of coffee with and so on? He said no, because it makes no sense. He said, I see Bitcoin as real estate. You wouldn't take a chunk of your house to go and buy a cup of coffee with it, would you now? So he said he sees Bitcoin basically like real estate, like digital real estate you buy and hold and borrow against. That makes sense. But 6 billion people using as a payment network is just stupid. Because if it doesn't work now with the amount of people we have inside the crypto space, how is 6 billion people going to use the network? This is why I say alternatives like XRP is just better as a payment system than Bitcoin can ever dream of becoming. Honestly, XRP is just 10 times better as a payment system. Some people might like hearing that, some people might not like hearing that, but the truth is essentially difficult for some people to swallow. Now, it also is, you know, essentially just my perspective. But you can see where my perspective is coming from. Block's approach suggests essentially a shift in the walls, essentially the street style towards crypto integrated businesses, and as Bitcoin's presence essentially broadens, the financial experts anticipate profound mainstream adoption to be happening on that matter. All the best, honestly, to Jack Dorsey trying to expand Bitcoin to payment system. And you know, as I said previously, Binance Exchange once, a long time ago, tried to bring NFTs on the Bitcoin network and make this whole big campaign about it. NFTs on the Bitcoin network, and it was just this big event. And the event lasted 2 months. After that, Binance came forward and said, yeah, we're going to scrap the whole Bitcoin NFTs because the network's getting congested. The network could barely handle a NFT event, but 6 billion people using the payment systems makes some sort of sense to Jack Dorsey. Now, crypto trading firm QCP Capital is what we're going to talk about next. Crypto trading firm QCP Capital announces essentially alt season may have started already. And here are the details. QCP Capital, a leading trading firm operating in the crypto markets, announced in its weekly market report today, that was published, that a new altcoin season may have already begun. The company highlighted that various alt seasons indicators surpassed the 50 level, reaching the highest level since December, essentially 2024. And the open interest in ETH, essentially futures contracts, have increased from $180 billion to $280 billion in a week. According to QCP Capital, the most striking feature of this cycle is that institutional investors, rather than individual investors, are essentially leading the charge. This interest stems primarily from the clarification of stablecoin regulations following the passage of the Genius Act in the US. Companies have begun incorporating layer one, essentially blockchain assets like ETH and Sol and XRP and Adder into their financial balance sheets, which is very true. A lot of companies have been going, XRP is just doing extremely better than every other project out there. Let's just be honest with ourselves again. This strategy resembles the previous essentially adoptions of Bitcoin as a financial reserve asset by institutions like MicroStrategy and Metaplanet, the Japanese equivalent of MicroStrategy. The report also notes the investment in ETH could increase further, essentially further if the US SEC approves the ETH staking supporting spot for essentially Ethereum. If Ethereum gets a staking capability as an ETF, it will obviously do a lot more better. The reason why Bitcoin ETFs did tremendously well because of its essentially limited token supply. The reason why Ethereum essentially ETFs didn't do too well at all when they first launched compared to essentially Bitcoin ETFs and still till now is because Ethereum had really nothing to offer for institutions. High-profile institutions or high-profile investors didn't really see Ethereum ETFs as something they'll be interested in because it offered nothing to them. However, if Ethereum ETFs offered staking capabilities, then that could be a selling factor where investors will think, well, if I buy Ethereum ETFs, I can make money on top by staking it. And Bitcoin's obviously selling factor was its limited supply, even though BlackRock said they can increase it, which the Bitcoin Maxis weren't happy about that advert anyway. The essentially report also notes that the investments in Ethereum could increase further if the SEC essentially improves the ETH capabilities for staking. In the coming months, such a development could lead some funds into essentially from Bitcoin into essentially Ethereum ETFs because the staking capabilities. Indeed, last week, daily net inflows into Ethereum spot ETFs outpaced those of Bitcoin just because of the filing for the ETF. QCP also stated that the September and December bullish essentially future strategies bull can spread and were actively essentially opened in the Ethereum options market, reflecting optimistic essentially expectations inside the market space for the fourth quarter of 2025. Finally, Bitcoin's overall market dominance decreased from 64% to 60%, while Ethereum's essentially market shares increased from 9.7% to 11.6%. QPC said also XRP's market shares increased as well. Noted that if essentially these trends continue, the altcoin season will strengthen further and the market momentum could shift to newer tokens, which essentially being again XRP, XLM, XDC, Solana, Cardano. There's a lot of tokens out there. The company stated that it will continue to monitor the market closely and will quickly convey developments to investors. So according to QCP Capital right now, the markets essentially are shifting towards this alt season that's happening, and it's already started in their words. I'll be very honest, it kind of did. The moment the regulations essentially got passed and one was signed, the rest about to be signed as well, it kind of did start, I'll be very honest. Because that's all we needed for the crypto space. We needed regulations to be happening. Obviously, there's still some things we need inside the crypto space as well to be happening. One being the SEC dropping the case for Ripple. I was about to sentence that a very different way, but one of them being the SEC dropping the Ripple case. That we essentially want that to happen as well. And obviously, we need to have ETFs happening for the rest of the essentially altcoins out there as well. So a few things that's starting to happen, and a few other members of the essentially American government who are very high position seats need to also become crypto friendly or even replace. One of them being Jerome Powell. But there are a few things to happen. Now, moving on essentially from the QCP report to Abu Dhabi. Before we talk about Abu Dhabi, let's go inside the comment section first. As I said previously, this is live, which means if you do have any questions or even statements to make, put it down inside the comment section. I'm more than happy to help you out. Let's see where we're at inside the comment section. And then we go straight into the Abu Dhabi news. Let's see where we were at. We were at here. Ray, let's go. What about Quant? Quant is good. Quant can do well for itself. There's only one lie around Quant that a lot of people were misled on. That Quant is the official partner of the Bank of England. It was never the partner of Bank of England. A lot of people assumed it was because so many crypto influencers a long time ago told a lot of people or everyone that Quant was essentially the partner of Bank of England. It really wasn't. They were chosen, essentially not chosen. A lot of companies, there was a specific time at that time of era where the Bank of England said they're essentially they want companies to participate in some testings and so on. So Quant obviously essentially entered into the participation projects, and so did a lot of other companies out there as well. And then the influencers ran with the idea that the Bank of England is partnered with Quant, which was completely false news. All the news agencies were running with the same idea as all the crypto news companies out there as well. That's one major lie that was told about Quant. Quant's biggest partner, actually, in fact, is an Italian company, if I'm not mistaken. They do have a lot of money as well, a lot of liquidity, but that's their biggest partner. So look, Quant it's an interesting one. It's something that could do well, but and due to its limited, extremely limited token supply, people will presume it will go absolutely blasting through, and it can do. Quant can do very well for itself, to be fairly honest. But I don't think it has the potential to be a global project. I don't think it has the potential to become a global project, is what I would say. It will do well because it has a ridiculously low token supply, not because it's offering something new to the financial sector in any sort of a way. But it will do well because of its limited token supply and the hype behind it, and of the other companies that are standing behind it. But I don't ever see Quant playing on the global scale in any sort of a way, as if the whole world is using Quant for something. I just can't see that happening. I can see the whole world using, for example, XLM or XRP, or even AVAX and Solana and Cardano and so on. But I can't see a project like Quant being used on a global basis. I can see it being used in certain countries. For example, the biggest partners that are coming for Quant is from Italy, for example. So I can see Quant being used in certain countries, but I just don't see it as a global project down the road. But it does have a ridiculously low token supply, so a little push could go a long way on Quant. Always remember that. Not financial advice in any sort of a way. Is CTF a good coin to invest? Is CTF a good coin to invest? I'll have to look into it to give you a better perspective, Burberry. Put a comment outside the live, because you're watching from YouTube as well. So put a comment outside the live on YouTube regarding CTF. Just write CTF question mark, and I'll reply back to your question. No problem. I was looking into it, see if there are any contracts or licensing or anything, and then I'll get back to you. I would love to visit London. Let's go, Scott. Hello, homie. Cholo Life. Hi, Miles. What do you think of ZBEC? What do I think about ZBEC? When I was first, a very, very long time ago, I used to hold ZBEC. A very long time ago, I used to hold ZBEC. Before the crypto influencers this year started talking about ZBEC, a long time ago, I had ZBEC, and I sold it. Just want to make that clear as well. I sold it. I had it a long time ago before the ZBEC hype even started, a year or 2 years after, whatever. And essentially, I sold ZBEC a long time ago as well. So the reason why I sold it back then is because they promised a lot of things. Not a single one came through. So that's why I sold it back then. And then essentially you fast forward to essentially this year, where everybody was for a time period talking about ZBEC this, ZBEC that, and so on. What I would say is, in my eyes, they failed to deliver on their promises a long time ago. I hope that they don't fail this time. I'm not going to be holding it. I'm not going to be buying it at all ever again. But for the people that are holding ZBEC, I hope that you do very well for yourself, and I hope that ZBEC promise, the things that they promise, they actually do deliver it for the first time in their lives. But personally, me, I will never touch ZBEC with a 10-foot pole ever again. I had this token before the hype even started. It was like a year ago or so, even longer, that I had this essentially. It's not a project I will ever enter into again. They lied. Their promises never came through. So yeah, I hope that people who are holding ZBEC to do very well for themselves, and that ZBEC delivers on their promises. But for me, once they lied once or twice, I was pretty much out. So, but yeah, I hope whoever is holding ZBEC now does well for themselves, is what I would say. For me, never again. Did that once, when they say been there, did that, never again. That's what I would say. Now, hello, Miles. Yeah, that's what I think about ZBEC, is what I would say. Doesn't everything need to go through quant? Doesn't everything need to go quant? Good question, Nori. No, at all. I don't know who started this crypto trend. Which influencer was out there that's made the statement that everything needs to go through quant. That is an absolute big, massive lie. Quant can't even handle that type of momentum for everything to be going through it in any sort of a way. That's just one big lie. I'm sorry to say, whoever is out there that believes that everything needs to go through quant, it doesn't, and it's not going to. The same way they lied about Quant's Bank of England partnership when it was just a participation project, which anybody could have participated into. In fact, a lot of companies did. The same way they lied to everyone about essentially crypto influencers lied the hell out of Quant, honestly. They lied through their teeth for Quant because Quant had an extremely limited token supply. And the influencers brought into Quant. When Quant first came out, Quant had a very, very limited token supply. Influencers, crypto influencers at that time, brought a lot of Quant and then told their entire following base, every crypto influencer at that time did, they told everyone, buy Quant. It's the only chosen token. It's the limited supply token. It's, the government token, the Bank of England token, or whatever. And Quant started blasting through to high price points, which wasn't difficult for a token supply like that. But yeah, they definitely did push Quant up with your money and then cashed out on you by all the lies they fed you regarding Quant being the chosen golden goose, or essentially the Bank of England partnership. Everything was a lie. Nothing needs to go through Quant. It doesn't have a partnership with the Bank of England, and there's a lot of lies about Quant out there. Good project, but too many lies about it, which, yeah. And again, nothing needs to go through it in any sort of way. Nothing needs to go through Quant. Thanks, no problem, Laurie, anytime. XDC to 1,000 at least. XDC to 1,000 at least. Let's go, Burberry. XDC is a great project. Your mic is really rattling. Sorry about that. Don't bring it up, Miles. Let's go, JP. Burberry says, have you ever listened to Crypto Hulk? He has good information as well. I love both of your channels. Thank you so much, Burberry, for the kind words. And no, I don't listen to Crypto Hulk. I don't have anything against him. Just want to point that out as well. I don't have anything against Crypto Hulk. I've heard of Crypto Hulk. I just don't watch his content, but I've heard of him. I haven't heard bad things from him either. So, but no, I don't listen to him, to be fairly honest. But thank you so much for the kind words. Honestly, thank you so much for the kind words, Bobby. Thanks. Let's go. Probably good morning. Probably good morning, crypto pushing Quant. Yeah, good morning, crypto also pushed the other one as well, Lintico. That didn't really go too well either. Do what again? No, nothing against crypto. Good morning. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. So nothing against crypto. Good morning in any sort of way. People make mistakes sometimes. They pushed Link to Coin, the essentially company that was selling Ripple essentially shares that didn't exist, and they also pushed a few other crypto projects. But again, people make mistakes. So the crypto essentially good morning crypto show made mistakes. It's normal. What's your thoughts on why the SEC hasn't released an XRP statement yet? What's my thoughts on why the SEC hasn't released the essentially XRP statement? Well, they have to, is what I would say. The SEC has no choice but to release essentially, the Ripple case. They have to essentially drop that case. There's nothing to go on, is what I would say. And now that the regulations that came through, Ripple's actually doing pretty damn well for itself. XRP is climbing the ranks, so it went past McDonald's in terms of market cap. It went essentially past Shell, if I'm not mistaken. So XRP is doing pretty well, even still slightly being held back, and not really being held back at all as well at the same time. So that case has to get dropped ASAP, is what I would say. Why essentially the SEC is trying to hold it back? Because They're CUNTs. But quarter fourth, essentially, by the end of this year, the XRP case is gone, definitely. It should be gone a long time ago, to be fairly honest, but it should be done now. Quarter three, quarter four is when it's going to be gone. Now, some might say also it's because of timing. They're trying to hold it back because of timing purposes. So it's the perfect timing for it to essentially let go of the case. And the other option is obviously just being CUNTs. Now, Abu Dhabi is what we're going to talk about next. Abu Dhabi courts start accepting essentially crypto in the first ever move for the region. The Abu Dhabi essentially judicial department has officially started accepting cryptocurrencies for court-related service payments. This is pretty much the first ever country for their court system to be accepting essentially cryptocurrencies, and Abu Dhabi is the first one to do this. It could send a movement for other essentially legal judicial systems around the world to accepting cryptocurrencies as some form of legal tender. This move marks in the essentially first government institution in the Middle East to allow such transactions using a regulated digital coin. For example, imagine if the Ripple essentially case was paid using XRP instead of essentially fiat. Residents will now be able to settle judicial and legal service fees in AE coin through the AE Secure wallet. The unification follows a collaboration with the Al Marja Bank in a line essentially with the department's agenda to make more public services accessible online. Dr. essentially Yusuf said that the judicial department stated that the system helps facilitate their broader digital change initiatives. He also mentioned that the strategy will render legal procedures more accessible and also in accordance with the national objectives of fintechs. He also said that these steps include accepting AU coin as a fair payment in the integrated essentially transport center in June and introducing this option by the Air Arabia to book flights shortly after. These investments essentially demonstrate a multi-sector rollout of high-impact areas. Mohammed Wasim Kaital, the CEO of essentially AI of Al Marja Bank, said the rollout will help modernize government service payments. He emphasized that the integration of AE coin supports secure regulated financial transactions in line with the national goals. In this case, Ramaz, the general manager of AED stablecoin, mentioned that the usability of AE coin by public institutions is vital. He also essentially observed that this application indicates increasing confidence in a controlled operations involving the use of stablecoins. Individually, the Dubai essentially Department of Finance recently entered into an MOU with Crypto.com to consider moving towards cryptocurrency payments for government services, which I revealed a way back. These changes essentially indicate a bigger trend of blockchain adoption in the UAE public finance, and the ADI Foundation also expects to introduce another dirham-based stablecoin, AEDC. This project will be built on to help the first Abu Dhabi bank and ADQ sovereign wealth funds. The Abu Dhabi court system accepting cryptocurrency marks a historical change in how legal services essentially are assessed and paid for. This development essentially reinforces the AE's growing commitments to integrating digital assets into the public sector. So first of a country to accept, essentially, even in the Middle East, to accept digital payments for legal services in a judicial system. It's nice to see how far cryptocurrencies have come, to be fairly honest, is what I would say. Now, the White House. The White House to unveil a landmark crypto policy report. Now, we talked about the crypto White House policy report about a week back, talking about how it's going to come out very soon, and we're getting to that deadline. So, the report follows a momentum of recent legislative breakthroughs, such as the Clarity Act and the Genius Act, and it marks essentially the next step in building a comprehensive federal framework for crypto economies. This policy essentially document stems from Executive Order 14178, and it's signed essentially back in 2022, which called for a unified approach to digital asset oversights, access federal agencies. The upcoming report will likely include guidance on stablecoins, crime essentially prevention, CBDC research, and environmental considerations related to crypto mining. Just want to point this out, that the crypto report coming up from the White House is also going to involve CBDC's research. As some of you might know, the anti-CBDC, obviously, as I said previously, is not really an anti-CBDC act that the US is not allowed to go into CBDCs. It's just, as I said previously, that the Federal Reserve is not allowed to create CBDCs. Another entity can. And interesting enough, the White House might be releasing a CBDC research report also. They also said that essentially it may also suggest the creation of a national digital asset reserve, possibly composed of tokens seized through the enforcement actions. The policy blueprint is expected to recommend clearer rules for the market structure, financial access for crypto firms, and consumer protections. It could lay the foundation for how crypto assets are taxed, classified, and regulated moving forward, impacting areas from DeFi to NFTs. The report essentially arrives just after Crypto Week on essentially Capitol Hill and a growing political support, including President Trump's push towards eliminating capital gains tax on crypto payments. CFTC Commissioner Caroline Pham described the report as a roadmap for the U.S. crypto leadership, underscoring its potential to shape the next phase of the digital asset innovation and regulation. The U.S. House Crypto Report is coming out this month, and according to the CFTC Commissioner, it's going to be the roadmap of what's going to happen next inside the U.S. regarding cryptocurrencies. That's going to be an interesting one to read. Now, moving on from the White House Crypto Report to Strategy. Strategy has just boosted its Bitcoin holdings with an additional 6,220 Bitcoins. Strategy recently revealed it has essentially acquired 6,220 Bitcoins units for essentially about $739.8 million at an average essentially price of $118,940 per coin. This latest purchase essentially was made between July 14th and July 20th, according to its new filings with the US SEC. The latest move increases Strategy's total holdings to 607,770 Bitcoins, worth over $71 billion at current prices. It also essentially is worth noting that the NASDAQ-listed company spent about $43.61 billion, including fees on its total fees, essentially on its total holdings. This milestone marks Strategy as the 9th largest essentially holder of cash and cash equivalents among S&P 500 essentially companies. Interestingly, this move also reflects the firm's ongoing commitment to utilizing essentially Bitcoin as an asset, as a corporate treasury essentially strategy. Meanwhile, from an investment viewpoint, Strategy's average cost for Bitcoin is now lower than the current market price, showing significant unrealized gains. As such, the company's buying strategy shows its role as a leader of adapting into digital assets and indicates that more institutions are becoming confident in Bitcoin's long-term values. Notably, the software intelligence firm said several shares were used to fund its latest Bitcoin purchase. This includes at the market shares offerings. We're back. Can everybody see me? Put a thumbs up if you can see me. Put a thumbs up in the chat if you can see me, because I think we just lost connection for a second. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're back. Yeah, some analysts believe that this premium is justified due to the company's strong, essentially, equity to Bitcoin cycle. Others, essentially, however, have raised concerns about a possible negative feedback loop from essential overdependence on Bitcoin's valuations. A recent class action lawsuit also claims that I don't know what's happening. Okay, we're back, I think. Yep. No idea what's happening. You're back. Thumbs up. You're back. No, good, bad. I'm back. I think we're back. Yeah, we're back. As a result, the acquisition's MetaPlanet total crypto holdings climbed to 15,555 bitcoins. MetaPlanet also has increased their bitcoin essentially purchases, so has MicroStrategy due to their new SEC filings that's been going on. It feels like if I try to share some sort of MicroStrategy news, it doesn't like it. Doing the right thing, keep going. Let's go. Now, moving on essentially from MetaPlanet's essentially new purchases, didn't really go well with the connection, to BitGo. BitGo Exchange has just joined the other ranks of crypto companies going public. So here it is. BitGo files for essentially a confidential for the US IPO. BitGo, a prominent crypto custody firm, has filed essentially confidentially for a US IPO. As confirmed by the company on July 21st, 2025, the IPO underlines the growing interest in regulated crypto custodians amidst increasing institutional investments. BitGo, established back in 2013, has moved essentially towards a public offering in the US. The fund focuses on institutional custody holdings over $64 billion in assets. Mike, essentially the CEO and co-founder of BitGo, remarked BitGo Holdings announced today the confidential submission of a draft registration statement related to proposed IPO of its Class A shares SEC filing. The company filed a draft registration with the US, essentially SEC. Institutional inflows have sparked demand for regulated custody like BitGo's. Essentially, the IPO follows a $100 million funding round, highlighting institutional confidence. The filing could also influence Bitcoin and Ethereum pricings. Market reactions are anticipated, given BitGo's essentially role in managing significant crypto assets. Previous IPOs, such as Coinbase, have set a precedent for enhancing sector credibility, yet increasing volatility. This filing could have essentially similar effects. Favorable regulatory shifts have been pivotal, with the recent policies benefiting crypto custodians. The IPO marks continued institutional investment trends. If you're somebody that's inside of Coinbase shares right now, because they are also massive as one of the biggest crypto exchanges out there, BitGo also is quite big as well. They hold essentially roughly about $64 billion worth of assets, and they are about to go public. So if you're somebody that likes to go for crypto essentially shares on the stock market, BitGo might be something you might want to look into while they're essentially applying for going IPO. Now, moving on from BitGo going public to Ripple's XRP. So this is the segment of the show where we move on to the XRP news now, the good news. Ripple's XRP, the essentially $3.65 essentially milestone, congressional approval of crypto bill sparks an all-time high breakout. Ripple's native token, essentially XRP, has broken its all-time high, reaching $3.65 after the US House of Representatives passed two major crypto-focused legislative bills, the Genius Act and the Clarity Act, and obviously the CBDC Act. Now, XRP price essentially reached a new peak of $3.65, surpassing its previous all-time high of $3.40. This follows a recent strong performance in the market. In the past week alone, XRP has surged nearly 40%, surpassing essentially the $200 billion market cap milestone. Two bills passed with the bipartisan support are widely regarded as a regulatory breakthroughs for digital assets inside the United States. The Genius Act shortfall framework aims to create the first federally regulated stablecoin system. At its heart, Ripple's RLUSD essentially is expected to serve as an underlying asset in this new financial infrastructure. Crypto legal essentially advancements for regulatory transparency and innovation during the Clarity Act focuses on improving disclosures, licensing, and consumer protection for digital asset firms. Analysts say the passage of these essentially reduces regulatory ambiguity, particularly for XRP, which has long entangled in a legal essentially dispute with the US SEC. It is true, the Clarity Act obviously works in favor of the XRP by a mile. Although the Ripple versus SEC case is still continuing, Congress legislative actions is seen as a significant boost to Ripple's essentially arguments that XRP is not a security. It's also worth noting that the open interest in XRP derivatives increased by 18%. A lot of people don't know know that. Just to repeat that one more time, XRP's derivatives increased by 18% to over $10.5 billion, while derivatives trading volume has skyrocketed nearly 140% to essentially 39.6 billion essentially dollars, as reported by CoinGate. For XRP, derivatives market for XRP is absolutely blasting through. Crypto experts now believe it's only a matter of time before the XRP price hits $5 or even higher, especially as institutional and retail investors rush to secure positions ahead of the legislative clarity. While XRP's breakout is fueled by legislative clarity and renowned investor confidence, market observers warn that volatility could persist as traders observe the broad implications for a new regulatory framework. For now, XRP has reclaimed its position as a key altcoin to watch. Whether the momentum sustains depends on how regulatory agencies interpret and implement the Genius and Clarity Acts, and how Ripple's ongoing legal proceedings evolve. To add on top of that, remember when I was saying essentially that there are two versions of why the SEC went after Ripple regarding Gary Gensler? I said, the first essentially, outcome for the majority of the crypto space who supported Ripple and XRP's venture on this lawsuit was that the SEC and essentially Ripple were colluding together because it's all about timing, and they were trying to hold Ripple back on purpose to release it at the perfect time for the financial sector to take off and so on. And I said there was a second outcome on the table a long time ago, that basically the SEC was weaponized to go after XRP because of the threat of Ripple taking over the banking sector, especially inside the United States and then the world. And I said certain banks might not like the idea of essentially, Ripple growing and becoming not just their competitor, but completely taking over the game. And now that we have regulations day by day, we're getting closer to Ripple starting that takeover essentially strategy. And certain banks like JP Morgan might not like that idea. Now, the interesting part about that is today, news has come out. So we all know that Ripple has essentially applied for a banking charter. They also applied for a Fed account for XRP. Well, here is something interesting. This is how much of a threat Ripple is. These banks know, all of these big banks know that the moment Ripple gets its license and its Fed account approval, it's game over for all these banks. We've also had the essentially data come out that $6.6 trillion will be exiting essentially, traditional bank accounts, entering into the crypto sector through stablecoins. But here it is, 5 US essentially banks move to delay Ripple's banking license as XRP's price nears all-time highs. So 5 US banks came forward to slow down the Ripple essentially filing for it to get a bank license. Now, why would 5 banking associations go out of their way to slow down Ripple's progress to get a banking license? Because they know how much of a threat Ripple is to them. And that they know the moment Ripple gets its approval, essentially its approval, it will crush them. We just got a Clarity Act and a Stablecoin Act, the Genius Act, and the Anti-CBDC Act, and Ripple's price essentially started moving, XRP's price started moving, and the banks are already worried. Let's just be honest. Ripple applied for a banking charter before the regulations happened, and the 5 banking associations didn't come forward to try to slow its progress down. We had the regulations, and XRP started moving. That's when the 5 banking associations came forward and said, okay, now we need to slow down Ripple, because Ripple's about to take off. And if Ripple takes off too much, it's coming for our jobs, basically the bankers. Because in a digital world, if I have an XRP wallet, that's all I need. I don't need a bank account anymore. And I don't have somebody like a bank telling me how to spend my money. So here it is. The latest price upswing came just hours after several major financial institutions formally opposed Ripple's application to establish a federally regulated national trust bank. Just think about that for a second. The moment the regulations passed, the moment XRP started climbing, 5 banking associations came forward and said, we need to slow down Ripple. because that's how much of a threat it is. In a joint letter signed today and sent off, the American Bankers Association, America's Credit Union, the Consumer Bankers Association, the Independent Community Bankers of America, not very independent, are they? Because they're very formulated, and the essentially Community Bankers of America and the National Bankers Association petitioned and asked the OCC to delay further considerations of Ripple and even Circle's application until all business details are fully disclosed and made available to public scrutiny. The letter emphasizes that approving these charters without public comment could give essentially an open door for non-banks to access privilege traditionally reserved for heavily regulated institutions. Granting these applications could essentially represent a fundamental departure from the existing OCC. A precedent that the associations firmly believe that such a departure demands public essentially input. A postponement would allow time and hopefully sufficient information for those public to meaningfully assess the application and the novel issues they present, the official statement read. I'll just be very honest. These 5 banking associations are pretty much begging for the OCC to stop the progress on Ripple, to slow down its case, to slow down its findings. They're begging the OCC because they know what Ripple's capable of. Ripple and Circle are among a growing list of crypto-native firms seeking to secure a formal banking charter in the US. Stablecoin issuer Circle, which also went public in May, filed to operate as a trust bank that would manage USDC reserves and institutional digital asset flows. Ripple followed soon after applying to oversee stablecoin and custodial services under the name Ripple National Trust Bank. At press time, neither Ripple Labs nor the CEO, essentially Brad, has issued an official response to the coordinated lobbying efforts. Also, however, early market signals suggest that investors are largely essentially unmoved. XRP has still done very well for itself. Nobody cares that these 5 banking associations have, again, somebody is weaponizing them to go against Ripple. The XRP community doesn't care at all. XRP is doing very well for itself because we know where we stand. So far, we're winning. The free crypto regulations passed, and the banks are all essentially, well, they're scared. The easiest way to put it, the banks are scared. Some banks are very scared. And they're weaponizing now the banking associations to go after Ripple. First, they weaponized Gary Gensler to go after Ripple, to slow down Ripple's progress so they can catch up to Ripple. But that failed because Gary Gensler obviously is out of the picture and Ripple has been growing day by day all over the world. Then they try to slow down its progress even more through the FDIC, which told essentially anybody that they're not allowed to work at crypto companies, obviously including Ripple. That didn't work either because the FDIC chairman got replaced. A lot of things the bankers didn't work. And this is pretty much their last straw, to get 5 banking associations to go after Ripple to slow down this OCC application for a banking charter license and to get XRP into the Fed. Are they going to win? No. Is Ripple going to win? Yes. And they know for a fact that once Ripple gets his license, that's when the games really start with the banks versus Ripple and Ripple taking over. And that Ripple is going to go after every single one of them for slowing down their progress and weaponizing the SEC, for slowing down their progress and weaponizing the CFTC, for slowing down their progress and weaponizing the FDIC, for slowing down their progress and weaponizing the OCC. Ripple's going to go after every single one of these organizations, all these lobbyists that's been going on regarding them up against Ripple. And it just shows you that, Ripple essentially is here for a takeover. And these banks are extremely scared. And I know where I stand with Ripple because they're coming in to change the game. And I love the idea of bankers sweating. The idea of bankers just sweating, don't know what to do, panicking is just a very nice, beautiful scene to see. Just watching bankers panic 24/7, knowing that Ripple is here to take their jobs from them. Now, by the way, for some reason, I can't see the comment section now. I don't know what's happening. Okay, while the comment section connects, the Genius Act fuels Ripple's rise, essentially, and here's the breakdown of what's happening. The essentially founder or the co-founder of the Black Swan Capitalist believes that Ripple's RLUSD will serve as the US Treasury's primary tool to globalize the dollar and soon replace unregulated stablecoins like Tether's USDT. After months of negotiations, lawmakers have finally approved the Genius Act, as essentially what we talked about, marking a major milestone in the US crypto regulations. While essential legislation aims to streamline oversight and strengthen trust in stablecoins, industry leaders argue that this is true impact and it could essentially extend far beyond basic compliance. The co-founder of the Black Swan Capitalist has floated a bold prediction that Ripple's XRP's upcoming stablecoin RLUSD could become the US Treasury weapon of choice in globalizing the digital dollar. According to the essential co-founder, the Genius Act may have just paved the way for the RLUSD and XRP to not only rival but eventually dethrone Tether's USDT dominance, especially as Ripple's blockchain gains traction in institutional finance. He also went on to say, with the legal framework for stablecoins now in place, RLUSD operates today as a fully compliant institutions-grade US dollar stablecoin backed one by one, essentially one-to-one ratio by dollar deposits, short-term US treasuries, and other cash equivalents, and issued natively on the XRP ledger. He also added, by tokenizing US debt and integrating it with XRP's liquidity layer RLUSD can enable real-time cross-border settlements. This is how value moves globally in a post-SWIFT world. He also highlights that central banks' record-breaking gold purchases mounting pressure on the dollar and raising a deficit as evidence that the US has exhausted its traditional monetary tools. Hence, to restore credibility without triggering default, essentially, he proposes replacing essentially gold tokenized sovereign debts and building a system on XRP. While RLUSD is currently backed by treasuries and cash reserves, essentially envisions a future where a gold-backed stablecoin on the XRP ledger delivers transparency, liquidity, and global credibility. He affirms essentially that the next evolution, essentially as a gold-backed treasury token that can rebuild trust and restructure debt without weakening the dollar. He also further argues that the Genius Act establishes the foundation for compliant treasury-backed digital assets and is already driving capital away from essentially stablecoins like Tether towards regulated alternatives like RLUSD. He points out that the Ripple essentially has fully deployed its infrastructure and that XRP already bridges tokenized assets across the network, signaling that a shift is well underway. Therefore, he argues early movers to position themselves now as the new financial system continues to take shape. Remarking essentially on the same lines, he concluded it best, essentially what he said was, that's why I always say, don't sell your XRP. It's not just another altcoin. It's the new financial plumbing, and it's becoming monetary policy right before your eyes. The Genius Act isn't just a regulation, it's the catalyst for essentially XRP. And it really is, and I stand by 100%. But honestly, Ripple is here for the takeover. The takeover is going to be happening whether the bankers like it or not. Is the OCC going to slow down Ripple's progress? It shouldn't do, because the OCC is now pro-crypto, so is the FDIC. And the banking associations coming forward to slow down Ripple's progress, it doesn't show signs of strength from the banking sector. It actually shows signs of weakness from the banking sector, because it just shows how weak they are and how pathetic they are to be, first of all, weaponizing the SEC against Ripple, then weaponizing the CFTC against Ripple, then weaponizing the FDIC against Ripple, and now trying to weaponize the OCC against Ripple. So far, none of their plans have worked, and neither is this one. And Ripple is coming for that takeover. It's not coming here to play nice. The faster they realize that, the better it is. And honestly, I can't wait for the day that Ripple turns the table on them and essentially goes after all of them for lobbying and weaponizing all of these US departments to go after them. Can't wait for that day. And the idea of bankers panicking is just beautiful to watch. On that note, this was episode 338 of the CMF Live. If you're watching this for the first time ever, this was CMF Live. It stands for Crypto Miles Family. My name is Miles. And you can tune to this live show Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. London time, where I share the most recent news regarding cryptocurrencies, CBDCs, AI, politics, and regulations. Pretty much vital information for you to know about regarding the world transforming into a digital sector. We have reached the endings of tonight's live. So, if you watch this for the first time ever, this was called the CMF Live. This is episode 338. Tune in tomorrow for episode 339 of the CMF Live. I'll see everybody tomorrow, same timing as usual. Before obviously we do go, let's start the comment section first. And by the way, I just want to say the comment section midway through the live towards the end disappeared. So I can only see comments from where JP has said, "Good night, Miles, and all the CMF. Thank you for a great live. And great news, XRP and their plan B is going to fail too. Ripple is coming for a takeover. Let's go, JP. See you tomorrow, but at the same time as usual." So yeah, just say I can only see the comment section from JP's comment where it says good night. Everybody else's comment I can't see anymore. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what happened to the comment section midway, but I can see the comment section now again. Night, Miles and CMF. Pablo, see you tomorrow same time as usual. Good news. Let's go, John. See you tomorrow same time as usual. Great live, Miles. Thanks and good night. Let's go, Comatose. See you tomorrow same time as usual. Great live, Miles, as usual. Good night, Miles and CMF. Let's go, JD. See you tomorrow same time as usual. Thanks, Miles. Have a great night and see you tomorrow same time. Let's go, Optistic. See you tomorrow same time as usual. Night all. Thanks, Miles. Great live. Let's go, John. See you tomorrow same time as usual. And the chat has disappeared again. Okay, the comment section for some reason is not working. It will work tomorrow. Don't worry about it. But for now, it's not really working, to be fairly honest, which means I can't see any more comments again. If you have put a comment down and you're saying essentially, have a good night and thank you so much for a good live show. Honestly, thank you so much to everybody from the CMF who tuned into this live show and has tuned into every other live show that I've done. I will see everybody tomorrow, same timing as usual for episode 339 of the CMF live show. Love you all. See you all tomorrow. Like, comment, retweet. And I'm sorry about the comment section that keeps on disappearing, coming back. It's disappeared again. See everybody tomorrow, same time as usual. These problems will be resolved tomorrow. Don't worry about it. See everybody tomorrow, same time as usual. Everybody have a great day or a good night, depending on where you are around. See everybody tomorrow, same time as usual.